Any question you want to ask in the world, now's your chance. Ask it. Ask away.
Why do flamingos have their knees on backwards?
So that has to do with the way they eat.
Well, I guess it would.
So.
And if you know about what they eat, then you know why they're pink, right?
Right.
Because of the shrimp.
Shrimps.
Yeah.
It's plural. Shrimps.
Which proves that they cook them before they eat them, because
right.
regular shrimp aren't pink.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Their stomach is actually a small barbecuer.
A hibachi.
It's a pizza oven.
I think they call it.
It's a pizza oven.
Yeah. So, okay, let's
Hi, everybody. Todd Conklin, the Pre-Accident Podcast. How are you? I know you're excited. You don't even act like you're not excited. You're excited. This feels exciting. This is excitement, is what this is. Because this, my friends, is a conversation with young Marc-Q, who's really my same age, but I like to say he's young. It works out pretty well. And this is a great one. It's a really good one. It's kind of a starter podcast. So Mark and I were hanging out because we had some time to hang out. And he said he wanted to ask me any question he wanted to ask me. So I put him on the spot and said, let's do it, baby. And that's the podcast you're about to hear. And I think you're going to enjoy this podcast because it's really fun. And it's relatively informative. And it talks about the stuff that we think about and do all the time. And I hope you're good as well because, well, you know, that's important. We hang out quite a bit, you and I. So might as well be good. And looking forward to, a great, bright, sunshiny future, which is what we do this time of year, is we look forward to a great, bright, sunshiny future, which is what happens. All is well here. Things are just popping. Just popping. And it's kind of fun in a way. It's interesting to me, and I bet you think the same thing, but it's interesting to me as we start looking at this philosophical shift in the way we manage reliability and resilience in our organizations, you start to really see a change in how people think about the way they do their work. And it becomes really interesting. I've decided, and I'm curious what you think, I'm probably going to talk about this more, but learning is really it's a transformational activity. It changes you, right? And that makes sense. You knew that. That's not like rocket science. What's interesting is how transformational it is to an organization. That the more an organization learns about the way they do work, the more they sort of dig and uncover sort of the raw truth about what happens when people perform their function, the smarter the organization gets. And what's interesting is the less willing they are then to go back to the old sort of name, shame, retrain model of doing business. And that push towards knowledge, that push towards becoming a learning organization, that's a really valuable thing. And that's what you do. That's exactly what you're doing, is you're creating transformational change by increasing the amount of knowledge, and by learning more, your organization then makes better, smarter, faster, more efficient, and quite honestly, more profitable responses. It pays. And that's a big part of what Mark and I talk about. That you're going to hear us sort of talk about that. And that's a really important part of this podcast. So what I ought to probably do is shut up and play the podcast. That seems like that'd be a really smart idea. So let me back out gently and say this is Marc-Q, probably one of the foremost experts on work planning, pre-work activity, starting safe, that kind of stuff. That's what Mark does all over the world, actually. And he'll sort of offer his wisdom while asking me a bunch of questions where I will pretend to offer my wisdom, but you already know that my wisdom is only one airline magazine ahead of you. So sit back and enjoy. Be a part of this conversation. You're welcome. And as always, thanks for listening to the Pre-Accident Podcast. Tell your friends and keep slugging along, man. It's what makes the world go. And sit back and enjoy what Mark has to say. Here's Marc-Q and Todd Conklin on the Pre-Accident Podcast.
I'm ready.
So Todd,
yes. A lot of people are coming and hearing you speak about fatalities.
Yes.
Your recent book and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I had the privilege of sitting in on a few of these sessions, and they go over well. And what I notice is that I think some people come in with the expectation that, okay, this is going to be, the branded program that if I follow these steps, we're not going to kill anybody.
Right.
And I sense that people leave with, I don't want to say more questions than answers.
Probably.
But different questions. What's your goal there? I mean, it's great stuff, and it really gets people going, and I think it lasts with them, and they probably go back out there and do some good stuff with it. But what's your goal with it?
That's the goal. I mean, if that happens, that's amazing. So the goal, I think, is really that we shift thinking from the belief that a fatality is a super accident, at the top of Heinrich's pyramid.
Right.
To fatality is just it's a deviation. It's an anomaly. It's an unusual combination of normal performance variabilities that in this case happened without controls. So when it failed as badly as it could, as quickly as it could. So if you think about it that way, then what happens is that really changes the way you think about understanding and managing that work. So you can't just do the same crap better.
And harder
or more of it. You need to do different crap differently. And the different crap differently, as Decker will tell you, that stuff has to happen not in failure, not safety, but in operation. So fatalities are a function of successful work. A better way to say it, I think, is normal work.
Mm-hmm.
And normal work's normally successful. And so you have to manage that failure capacity, that ability to fail better. And what you're really managing is the ability to have controls. So the question is that better? I don't know if it's better. It's different.
Mm-hmm. And
different is probably what we need to do. The data for this is hard because it's hard to measure how many people didn't die.
Right.
Because if you do nothing, people don't die. Right? Because people are super adaptive and they think about and solve problems all the time.
So on that,
yes,
I agree.
That's French. We.
But measuring capacity.
Right.
Talk about that.
Well, we do it all the time. I don't know why people act like that's a mystery.
Right.
So how much gas is in your car right now?
It's a rental, so I already pre-calculated that I could make it all the way back to the airport
if you're
before
like
I
me,
filled up.
Yeah, no. In fact, I want to push it in to the airport. Did you buy a pre-tank?
No, I always bring it back full.
Oh, okay. So if I have to buy the tank prepaid, I calculate and I try to push it in on fumes the last 3 feet, so it's completely empty. But so I can tell you that my car right now, if you went out there, I happen to know this because I just came back from a trip for Thanksgiving. My car has a half tank of gas.
Right.
So if I'm going to go on an adventure, let's say you and I are going to drive to New Orleans, right? That'd be a fun place to go.
Sure.
I would need to get more gas.
Absolutely.
Right? So we measure lots of stuff by capacity. I don't know why this is such a mystery on the safety side. So you'd ask we're gonna put windows on the fourth story of a building. Do we need scaffolding? Well, yeah, we need scaffolding. Well, why? Well, because we need the capacity so that if something unusual happens, the guys have stable work platforms upon which to stand. It'd be faster to do it with aerial lifts. Be cheaper probably to do it with aerial lifts. Maybe, I don't know. It's fourth story, but it's probably better to do it in scaffolding, right? And what we're managing there is really some people. Excuse me. Some people would say risk, but what I think we're really managing there is the capacity to actually do the work better. So that's what I mean. Does that not make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think, but people, I think they say, well, I can't measure people not getting killed.
Right.
I can measure people getting cuts and scrapes and twisted ankles and things like that. That's really easy to measure. And I think what I'm really trying to push toward here is that when we have like the story you just told about putting up scaffolding, things like that,
entirely made up.
Yeah,
100%.
Out of bamboo.
I was only acting.
You made it out of bamboo.
That's
too.
right.
I saw that.
I was acting.
But when that capacity actually functions, in other words, the harm was diminished or limited by the fact that they, instead of using the scissor lift, took the time to put in the scaffolding and do all the fall protection. Do you see instances, because I do, where that when they actually have a failure and the capacity kicks in and prevents it from being catastrophic, it's still seen as a failure.
Yeah, oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's probably the next thing we have to fix, right? To me, the biggest problem is you can't measure something that doesn't happen, and we're really fixated on measuring crap.
Right.
And so we can't really measure what doesn't happen. So what's happened with the fatality stuff is you're starting to see, well, like the National Safety Council just did this big. Did you read it? This big 4-page thing on fatalities. I only know about it because somebody sent it to me because I'm in it a bunch.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
And it basically says that the hierarchy of controls, which I kind of got in trouble with because I made a comment about that, that the very best thing you could do is engineer out all the ways people could get hurt or could die. Well, so that's probably true, but I think it's impossible because how do you know all the ways? Our systems are so complex, you don't know all the ways they could fail.
Right.
And how would you ever engineer everything out? Plus, how would you ever afford to do that? So to me, you want to really think about fatalities not as the failure to prevent the accident, but the failure to control the energy.
Right.
So, which is kind of more like the STAMP model. It's kind of more of a resilience engineering model.
So coming from a place where I was the worker or the manager or the supervisor.
That would be Ryan Zinke's National Park Service.
I was.
Did I say that right? That's a new name, right?
I don't know. I've never met the man.
Oh, okay.
I met all the other secretaries, but not that one because I was gone by then. But managing, you call it high risk. I like to call it high hazard work.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I like high hazard because the hazard is sort of fixed and risk is what we.
No, that's good. And it's an alliteration. Alliterations are always better.
So high hazard.
Pass the peas, please.
And so 35 years of working with people who go out there and do that kind of stuff every day. When you ask them or when we talk amongst ourselves about quote-unquote safety programs,
right?
I've seen the good and the bad. And so a bad safety program, these people who show up to work every day, day after day, continuously improving and pulling off difficult stuff and doing it really well and safely, don't see safety as a separate part of what they're doing.
Right.
And in the worst cases, you have a safety office that's off there doing all kinds of other things. And so while these people are doing all of this high level work, really committed, doing a fantastic thing, but the managers and the safety people just have no knowledge of how that work is done and really don't have an interest in finding out what's done.
Right.
And then you end up with people who are like probably the safest, most professional people out there getting in trouble because their fire extinguisher is, gone 3 days without an inspection and it's been,
Or the stickers on the truck aren't right or whatever.
Exactly. They must not care.
Gotcha.
So, but
isn't that I'm trying to use this word fakakta. That's fakakta.
Yeah, that was on David Kestenbaum.
That is little David Kestenbaum. I love him.
He's fantastic.
Everyone should listen to This American Life, the one on
Free Will, where you tried to ambush me last time.
And yes, and David Kestenbaum talks about that in great detail, and he's a good friend. So talk to him. And it's how do you say it? Fakakta. Fakakta. I love that word.
I listened more carefully than you did.
Clearly.
Yeah. And then I've had safety managers and safety programs. And now I'm getting to work with all kinds of safety professionals. These really nice and good people to a person.
Kind of leading thinkers too.
Who have dedicated themselves to keeping other people safe. And it's really interesting to hang out with them. What I don't get sometimes is this. We're sitting here on a beautiful late fall day in New Mexico. And everywhere we've gone today, we're presented with a choice, and that choice is red or green. Maybe you can explain to people what that means.
So
it's the official question of
there are two kinds of there's one kind of chili, but depending on the maturity of the chili pod, it's either green when it's young and fresh, or red when it's older. Older sounds less. It's aged. That's more of a
ripened.
Ripened is a good word. And then it's often dried. Yeah. And they make a sauce or salsa, and there's a green salsa or sauce and a red salsa or sauce. And the green is usually quite fresh, oftentimes kind of bitey with a little tang, a little acid to it, and usually pretty spicy. The red is more of a, what's the word they use all the time? Umami.
Yeah.
It's more of a whole kind of bitter, very complex flavor. And you have to choose because every dish you order in New Mexico, they will ask you if you want green or red. And you can say green or you can say red, or you can say Christmas, which is
the official state answer.
Green and red.
Which brings me to the question.
Yes.
So red is good. Green is good.
I think red's the best.
And you can have both, and they don't necessarily compete with each other.
Right.
And I think sometimes as people are trying to work their ways through these different ways of thinking.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
They feel that you have to choose one or the other.
Behavioral-based safety versus new view. Is that where you're going?
Not necessarily between those two for sure, but there are many other permutations.
So the problem is you're right. There are many permutations that we could talk about, but the problem is not whether they're good or bad. It's how they view the worker. So, and the difference in my mind, and maybe it's just me, maybe nobody else sees this, is that the older programs, the behavioral observation programs, the DuPont stop card programs, those programs all take as their primary, their first principles, their primary assumption is that the worker needs to be fixed.
Right.
Right? Whereas human performance, or as Bob Edwards would call it, HOP, the HOP, right? The new view sees the worker not as the problem to be fixed, but in fact as the solution to be harnessed. Now,
so where's the Christmas in there?
I don't think there is.
Red and green. It's absolutely one of the.
I think it's a bimodal choice. I mean, I think it's an enormous philosophical shift in how the program is not only managed, but how it's directed. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the difference between asking who failed and what failed.
Right.
There is no middle between who and what.
Right.
Right? I mean, is there? I can't think of it.
No, it's pretty
That's
binary.
Fakakta.
That
is all fakakta.
I don't know if that
there.
meets the definition.
I like just saying that word.
But so when I talk to a worker, and so having lived my whole career knowing that we get the most bang for the buck out of understanding how people are functioning in their systems and what they're learning out there, even in successful work, and actually examining successful work so that we can get better. But when I hear people that are very red or green or black or white, we're just going to call it red or green, about the system is always to blame for some sort of deficiency versus the individual worker. Every single worker can tell you a case of like, oh, that guy Joe who used to work here, I'm so glad we got rid of him. And I think that's where people sometimes get confused.
But that's the problem with blame. I don't think I'm talking about blame.
Right.
I'm talking about conceptually how the program views the worker. Right. Yes. Is it directed towards the worker, or is it directed towards the process and system?
Yeah.
Blame is, there's plenty of blame, but the rule is every second you spend blaming somebody is a second. It's like being in the airport. It's a second of your life you don't get back.
Right.
Right. They say go to the airport 2 hours early.
You can get them back 0.25% at Cinnabon.
I'm for that.
Yeah, that works.
I'm pro Cinnabon. But I mean, and I understand that there needs to be some, and a lot of people really want there to be a happy medium. What they want to say is I want to shop some from column A and some from column B. And I want to take the best of both programs and create this third entity, which is the ideal state. So I think that's fine. I mean, I'm just one guy, right? Love me or hate me. The problem is that the only reason I think that won't work is because the difference between column A and column B is how they view the workforce. And the problem with behavioral-based safety is not behavioral-based safety. The problem with behavioral-based safety is that you have to have behaviors to observe, and the behaviors you're going to observe are the behaviors of the people.
Right.
And if you look at the people, you will always find that guy who didn't follow the rules, right? That guy who's a wildcat, who's a cowboy, who broke the rule on purpose. Well, if you build your argument based upon the extreme case, then what you're arguing is the extreme case. Here's what I'll tell you. There's a bell-shaped curve, and there's a whole fakakta number of people in the middle of that bell-shaped curve. Mm-hmm. They count too. And they're not marginalized. They're just normal Janes and Joes going to work.
Getting her done.
Well. Get her done. Right.
And so we're obsessively sometimes to the expense of understanding how the whole system works, spending times on the very edge of the beginning edge of the bell curve.
Right. Well, because it's the extreme cases are so, I mean, it's how people argue, right?
Right.
And you see it in safety, you see it in politics. Well, to me, what's so sad, and it's really sad, is that this argument has become so personal. It's not, at least to me, it's not personal. It's a very, very different fundamental shift in thinking.
Right.
It's not bad or good, right or wrong. It's not you're great, I suck, or you suck, I'm great.
Right.
But a lot of people, because they have a lot of vested interests in keeping these programs going, take this stuff really personal, and they get really, really, really angry. And they think it's like an attack on them as a human being. You know, I don't. They're fine. I mean,
so let me get all cable newsy on you.
Okay,
Todd, why do you hate Target Zero?
Because
would you want to work someplace that has a target of 3? I wouldn't.
So it's a moral separation. There's no question about it. And a lot of people are really, really, really wound up on this one. The bottom line is, and I would just ask this question, is if you mean 0, can we really have 0?
And then can you tell people how to do that?
No, well, you can't tell. I don't know how to tell you to not fail. Right? The issue here is that I think the moral argument that no one should get hurt is really a valuable argument. It's just not very practical in an applied way. The practical argument is not a very good moral argument, which is that some people will get hurt. I mean, I just went through this thing where I went to this really fancy pants group of people, board of directors, and I showed a slide that said death, and then I pushed a button, and the word injury covered the word death. And I asked the group of people, would you trade a fatality for a broken arm? Right?
Yeah.
And everyone said, of course.
Right.
Well, that's kind of where we are. Bee stings and dog bites are bad things, and we should manage them. But because somebody gets stung by a bee doesn't mean your program sucks. You're not going to get to 0,
right?
But you can still have a really good program, right?
So can we just dispense for this moment with the idea that and agree that everybody who actually comes to work and doesn't want to get hurt, or who employ people who come to work, probably has a target 0? They don't want people to get hurt, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's when we start to try to manage toward that 0 and try to pick things to count that we can sometimes be on that end of the bell curve. You were talking about where we're not seeing the things that are actually going to kill us.
It strikes me that that's a slippery slope. But I mean, I don't know. I've worked at a lot of places, and I've worked at places that had 0 in the literature and places that didn't have 0 at the literature. And the funny thing is, I didn't think one was safer than the other.
Yeah.
So the question I would ask, and it's just a question, I mean, and I'm wide open to your criticism, don't hesitate, is does Target 0 make you safer? If I took Target 0 away, if I pushed a button and erased it from all the posters, all the signs, all the stickers, all the banners, all the policies and procedure, would you be more dangerous?
So having lived this, I would tell you that places that interpret Target 0 in a way that they measure and accrue metrics on things that don't matter do absolutely create an environment where people don't want to disclose what's going on.
Sure.
I can't tell you how many times I've had employees that I supervise that I said, hey, you need to put in some workman's comp paperwork just in case over the weekend this thing that happened to you doesn't get better. Probably nothing, but it might be. And they say, listen, I don't want to get involved in that whole mess. I don't want to be the one responsible for setting the clock back to 0 after we've had, 8.5 hours with no injuries or 800 days or whatever it is.
Right.
I'm just going to cover that. If I have to, I'll cover it on my private insurance rather than get into the system. And that's what scares me.
And Mark, that is fakakta.
That is fakakta.
Did I use it right?
You can.
Okay, I used it. Yoo-hoo! I got it right. So it's interesting to me just because we've built a system. To me, the biggest problem is that we attach incentive funds.
Yeah.
So managers get paid more if they have 0.
Right.
And less if they don't.
And
so
nobody wants to be responsible for their boss losing the bonus.
Right. So every boss is one sprained ankle away from a bonus check. Yeah. Right. Well, so that's goofy. I mean, this is good. I mean, I don't know if other people think of it that way, but it's just we've drifted over time and we've made it legitimate, but it's not legitimate. Just because you say something a bunch of times doesn't make it real.
So I've been in situations where, as I said, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I've certainly seen it where the workers and the people in the safety professional end of things feel very much like they're on the same page, and they're not. I've actually, and this is a rare event, but I've seen safety professionals say, look, can you guys not do that ice rescue training that you do every December? Because every time you do that, somebody sprains an ankle or something or falls because the ice is very slippery.
It's ice.
Can you not do that training until January when it's a new year? And so if you have any darts, they won't count against this year. And then what you end up having is people who are about to get called into service to go do ice rescue who haven't had a chance to practice it in a year because now is December. It's the time to practice it when you have to go out and do it for real. It's crazy stuff like that.
I can't do the rescue yet. It's that rescue. That training is next month.
That was my question. What's more dangerous, going out there and doing the rescue when the call comes in when you haven't been refreshed on it for a year? Because
so I guess, and I guess that's where you'd want to ask for that third way, right? Is there a way to do that training that's safer? And asking the people who do the training can help you. And then ultimately the question would be at some point, somewhere in some dark room, is having an ankle sprain worth having highly trained people to do high risk rescues when it really matters.
Yeah. Well, I didn't cancel the training. So
no, good for you. That's a reasonable, as crazy as it sounds, it's a reasonable question because they're managing to the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And when we come back and we say we're so much more successful than we were 2 years ago, and when the workers and the managers who are collecting some of these numbers and we say, really, are we that much better? And then we find out, well, actually, we got to count it a little bit differently. Yeah. So this is great and everybody's happy. But that's so transparent to the workers. Right. And when they do that, workers don't take the very serious profession of safety professionals seriously.
I hear you.
And I'm not saying it's epidemic.
I think you're onto it. Okay, I have a question for you.
No.
Yes, no, I do. I really do.
Go ahead.
What's your New Year's resolution?
My New Year's resolution?
Yeah, because it's time. I mean, what's your theme for next year going to be? What's your New Year's resolution?
My New Year's resolution, I haven't even really given it any thought.
It strikes me that you're going into this blind.
I know. Yeah, I'm going into it totally blind. I'm pretty happy with the way things are. I think I'm mostly perfect. No. I'm good at I think I'll
I didn't ask what you were thankful for.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, I'm thankful for me, Todd.
That's right.
No, I have much to be thankful for. The New Year's resolution? I have to think seriously about it.
Okay, I'll give you time. We'll come back together.
I got some big ones.
Okay, any more final questions?
No, but just so you know, everybody, Todd forced me to do this, and I have a belly full of both red and green chili.
Christmas belly.
Fakakta Christmas.
Fakakta. Ho.
Happy holidays.
Cheers. And that, my friends, is the podcast for today. Just a little chat, conversation between Mark Yeston and Yo, and we're just chatting up some stuff. You could tell. We talked about all the big hits, that's for sure. We got them all, including the ever-present Zero and all the complexities that Zero brings to a conversation and an organization. We got them all. They're all there. It's what we talk about. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Listen, because there's a bunch of really great stuff coming up, so just be ready for that. I think you're going to enjoy that immensely. It's been fun. It's been really, really fun. I'll see you later in the week, I'm sure. Until then, my friends, learn something new every single day. I don't know if you did today or not. It's kind of up in the air. You'll have to tell me. Have as much fun as you possibly can. We did that for sure. We got that out of the way. And for goodness sakes, y'all, be safe.